Welcome to Module 2 of Behavior Therapy. Here, we will explore operant conditioning and reinforcement strategies. While classical conditioning, which we covered in Module 1, explains how we learn through association, operant conditioning explains how consequences shape our voluntary behaviors. Operant conditioning was developed through the work of Edward Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. Thorndike's law of effect states that behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated, while behaviors followed by unsatisfying consequences tend not to be. It seems obvious now, but this was revolutionary in understanding human behavior. The foundation of operant conditioning is the ABC model: antecedent, behavior, and consequence. The antecedence is what happens before the behavior, the trigger or setting. The behavior is the specific action we are interested in. And the consequence is what happens immediately after, which determines whether the behavior will increase or decrease in the future. It's crucial to understand how operant conditioning differs from classical conditioning. Classical conditioning involves involuntary automatic responses like salivating or feeling afraid. Operant conditioning involves voluntary behaviors, choices we make. In classical conditioning, the stimulus comes first and triggers a response. In operant conditioning, we perform a behavior and then experience consequences. The examples are fear of dogs after bite for classical and studying for good grades for operant conditioning. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There are 4 possible consequences arranged in a 2 by 2 matrix. We can either add something or remove something, and that something can be pleasant or unpleasant. Positive reinforcement means adding something pleasant after a behavior. This increases the behavior, whereas negative reinforcement means removing something unpleasant after a behavior. This also increases the behavior. Positive punishment, this means adding something unpleasant which decreases the behavior, and negative punishment means removing something pleasant. This also decreases the behavior. The terms positive and negative here don't mean good and bad. They mean adding or subtracting, like in mathematics. Let us dive deeper into positive reinforcement, as it is the most powerful tool we have for changing behavior. When we add something desirable after a behavior, we increase the likelihood that behavior will happen again. There are different types of reinforcers: primary, secondary, and social. Primary reinforcers satisfy biological needs such as food, water, warmth, sleep. These are inherently reinforcing without any learning required. Secondary reinforcers gain their power through learning. Like money has no inherent value, but we've learned it can be exchanged for primary reinforcers. Social reinforcers include attention, praise, and approval. These are incredibly powerful for most humans. The Premack principle, sometimes called Grandma's rule, states that high probability behaviors can reinforce low probability behaviors. First, you eat your vegetables, then you can have dessert. The preferred activity, dessert, reinforces the less preferred activity, eating vegetables. Let me give you practical examples. When a child cleans his room and receives allowance, he is more likely to clean it again. When an employee meets his target and receives a bonus, his performance continues. When you praise a student for raising his hand, he is more likely to raise his hand in the future rather than calling out. Negative reinforcement is one of the most misunderstood concepts in behavior therapy. Remember, it's not punishment. Negative reinforcement increases behavior by removing something unpleasant. There are two types: escape learning and then avoidance learning. Escape learning is when a behavior removes an ongoing aversive stimulus. You have a headache, then you take aspirin and the headache goes away. You've learned to take aspirin when you have headaches. Avoidance learning is when a behavior prevents an aversive stimulus from occurring. You study because you want to avoid failing. You fasten your seatbelts to stop that annoying beeping sound. But here's the critical problem with negative reinforcement, especially avoidance. It can trap people in maladaptive patterns. This is central to understanding anxiety disorders. Consider someone with a dog phobia. Every time they see a dog, they feel intense fear. If they avoid dogs, the fear immediately decreases. That is negative reinforcement. The avoidance behavior is strengthened because it successfully removes the unpleasant feeling. But here's the trap. By always avoiding dogs, they never learn that dogs are actually safe. The avoidance prevents extinction of the fear. The same pattern occurs in social anxiety. Avoiding social situations provide immediate relief but maintains the anxiety long term. In obsessive compulsive disorders, compulsive hand washing removes anxiety but it reinforces the compulsion. This is why exposure therapy is so important. It breaks the negative reinforcement cycle by preventing avoidance. Punishment decreases behavior, but it should be used cautiously. Positive punishment adds something aversive. A child touches a hot stove and gets burned. They're less likely to touch it again. Negative punishment removes something unpleasant, like taking away screen time for misbehavior. The problems with punishment are significant. It teaches what not to do but doesn't teach appropriate alternatives. It can create fear, resentment, and damage to the relationship. The effects are often temporary. The behavior returns when the punisher isn't present. And punishment can model aggressive behavior, especially physical punishment. In behavior therapy, we prefer reinforcement-based approaches wherever possible. Let me show you these schedules in real life because they are everywhere. Fixed ratio means reinforcement after a set number of responses. Factory workers paid per item produced make 10 widgets. Coffee shop cards displaying buy 10 coffees get 1 free. This creates high and steady rates of responding, but there's often a pause after reinforcement is delivered. Variable ratio means after an average number of responses, but it varies. This is gambling. Slot machines pay out after an unpredictable number of plays. Salespeople on commission, they don't know which customer will buy. This creates the highest and most persistent rate of responding and is incredibly resistant to extinction. This is why gambling is so addictive. Fixed interval means reinforcement for the first response after a set period of time. Weekly paychecks are an example. This creates a pattern where behavior increases as the time approaches, like studying increases right before a scheduled exam. Variable interval means reinforcement after varying periods of time, like checking emails. You don't know when a new message will arrive, so you check periodically. Understanding these schedules is crucial for designing effective interventions. Token economy systems are one of the most successful applications of operant conditioning. They were first developed in psychiatric hospitals in the 1916s by Allen and Azarin and revolutionized institutional care. Here's how they work. We identify specific target behaviors we want to increase. Patients earn tokens which are generalized secondary reinforcers for performing these behaviors. They can then exchange tokens for backup reinforcers like snacks, privileges, or activities. The beauty of token economies is the immediate feedback. You perform the behavior, you immediately get a token. The tokens bridge the gap between the behavior and the more delayed backup reinforcers. They're flexible so that different people can choose different rewards, and they teach delayed gratification. Let me give you a classroom example. Target behaviors might include completing homework worth 5 tokens, raising hand before speaking worth 2 tokens, helping a classmate worth 3 tokens, and students accumulate tokens throughout the day or week. The backup reinforcer menu might include 10 tokens for extra computer time and 25 tokens for a homework pass and 50 tokens for lunch with the teacher, or it can be 100 tokens for a class party. This system works because it provides clear expectations, immediate feedback, and individualized motivation. Behavioral activation is a powerful application of operant conditioning for treating depression. Peter Levinson developed a model of depression based on lack of positive reinforcement. When people become depressed, they withdraw from activities, which means they receive less positive reinforcement, which deepens the depression. This is a vicious cycle. Behavioral activation reverses this. We don't wait for motivation to return. Rather, we schedule activities first and mood follows behavior, not the other way around. Let me share a case with you. A 35-year-old client came in with moderate depression. She was staying in bed most of the day, had stopped all hobbies, rarely saw friends. In the first week, we had her monitor her activities. The data showed almost no pleasant or rewarding activities. Starting in week 2, we scheduled 2 just pleasant activities per day, a 10-minute walk and calling one friend. It felt forced at first, but she committed. By weeks 4 through 6, we gradually added more activities and increased their intensity. By week 8, her depression scores had decreased 60% and she had returned to work part-time. The key insight is that action precedes motivation in depression, not the other way around. We are using positive reinforcement like pleasant activities to increase engagement with life, which naturally lifts the mood. Functional assessment. Now let us discuss functional behavior assessment, which is crucial for designing effective interventions. We need to understand why a behavior occurs, what function it serves for the person. The A-B-C analysis helps us identify this. We carefully observe the antecedent, what triggers the behavior, the exact behavior, what precisely happens, and the consequence, what does the person gain or avoid. Behaviors typically serve 4 functions: attention seeking, escape or avoidance, obtaining tangibles, or sensory stimulation. Here's an example of a child having tantrums. Observation shows the antecedent is the parent asking the child to clean up toys. The behavior is screaming and throwing toys. The consequence is the parent gives up and cleans up themselves, and the child avoids the task. The function is clear: escape or avoidance. The tantrum successfully removes the demand, which negatively reinforces the tantrum behavior. Our intervention must match the function. We don't reinforce the tantrum by removing the demand. Instead, we teach an appropriate way to request help. We reinforcement compliance with cleanup, starting with very easy tasks and gradually increasing difficulty. We might use shaping and positive reinforcement for each step completed. Differential reinforcement strategies are powerful here. With differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, we reinforce a different appropriate behavior, like asking politely for help. With this differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, we reinforce a behavior that cannot occur at the same time as the problem behavior, like sitting calmly. With differential reinforcement of other behavior, we reinforce periods when the problem behavior doesn't occur. Let us summarize the key principles for designing effective interventions. First, define the target behavior specifically. Be good is too vague. Complete homework within 30 minutes without promoting is specific. Conduct a formal assessment to understand why the behavior occurs. Choose the appropriate reinforcement strategy based on that function. Select individualized reinforcers. Ask the person what they value. Determine the right schedule of reinforcement, like continuous for new behaviors, intermittent for maintenance. Plan for generalization and maintenance from the beginning. How will these gains persist in natural environments? And always monitor your data and adjust based on results. Behavior therapy is empirical. If it's not working, the data will tell you. The key takeaways are: operant conditioning shows how consequences shape behavior, reinforcement increases the behavior and punishment decreases it, but reinforcement is preferred. Variable ratio schedules create the most persistent behaviors. Token economies provide structured, effective reinforcement. Behavioral activation treats depression by increasing access to positive reinforcement. Functional assessment reveals why behaviors occur and guides intervention sessions. These principles apply across all settings: parenting, education, workplace, healthcare, and self-management. In Module 3, we will explore social learning and modeling techniques. Thank you.